What happens to women convicted of the most serious crimes in Kentucky during the dawn of the 1900s? That was the question 20-something-year-old Phoebe King reportedly asked after police captured her on a Chattanooga street in December 1900. She had been hiding for 4 months. Meanwhile, back in Pulaski County, Kentucky, a woman was dead. Phoebe's mother and brother were still fugitives, and newspapers were describing what happened near Flat Rock as a calculated family ambush. Phoebe did not deny that she had fired a pistol. She did not deny that her brother had carried a shotgun, and she did not deny that her mother had beaten the wounded woman with a stick. But Phoebe insisted she was not a murderess, at least, as she put it, not in the strictest sense of the term. What followed became more than a Pulaski County murder trial. It became a national argument over marriage, betrayal, gender, and a dangerous idea known as the unwritten law. On August 14, 1900, Epsey Sellers, known locally as Epsey, left her home in southern Pulaski County with at least one of her children. Exactly why she left remains disputed. She may have believed she was answering a message from a man she knew. She may simply have been walking toward town. Or she may have known that Nancy Hunley was waiting for her and that a confrontation was coming. The newspapers later published radically different versions of what happened near Flat Rock in the Tateville area. According to one account, Epsey was deliberately lured from home and attacked without warning. According to another, Nancy intended only to whip the woman. Whatever occurred before the first shot, Epsey Sellers never returned home. She was beaten and shot while her children were reportedly close enough to witness the attack. Newspaper reports described Nancy Hunley as a wife whose home had been disrupted by another woman. That woman was Epsey Sellers. The precise relationship among Epsey, Nancy, and Nancy's husband is difficult to reconstruct. The newspapers accused Epsey of having an intimate relationship with him, but they offered little evidence beyond allegation, reputation, and statements made by people accused of her killing. One account claimed Nancy's husband had borrowed money and property from Epsey before marrying Nancy, and then abandoned Epsey without repaying her. Another claimed that he continued sending a young boy to Epsey with secret messages arranging meetings. Even the husband's name is uncertain. Most Kentucky coverage referred to him as Hunley or Hunley, but a widely circulated Chattanooga report called him Brown. That discrepancy may have resulted from a reporting error, an alias, a prior surname, or a misunderstanding of the family relationships. The one consistent point was that Nancy believed Epsey had come between her and her husband. Phoebe later accused Epsey of taunting Nancy, harassing her publicly, and making the family's life miserable. But those claims came from a defendant attempting to explain her own actions. They were never independently established as fact. By August 1900, however, the conflict had reached its breaking point. The prosecution claimed that the Hunley family used a familiar method to bring Epsey to an isolated place. On the morning of the killing, the same boy was allegedly sent with another message. This time, prosecutors said, the message did not come from the man Epsey expected to meet. It came from the women waiting for her. Epsey reportedly left with some of her children. Near Flat Rock, she encountered Nancy Hunley, Nancy's adult daughter Phoebe King, and Nancy's son Miles. The earliest newspaper reports described a planned ambush. Epsey was allegedly waylaid, struck with a club, shot with a revolver, and left dead. But after Phoebe was captured, she offered a very different account. According to Phoebe, Nancy had not planned to kill Epsey. Her mother had announced that she intended to give Epsey what Phoebe called a sound thrashing. Nancy asked Phoebe and Miles to accompany her, not to participate in a killing, but to make certain Epsey did not overpower her. Phoebe said she agreed to intervene only if her mother began losing the fight. But before leaving, Phoebe armed herself with a pistol. That detail would later become difficult for the defense to explain. Phoebe claimed the family encountered Epsey while she was walking toward town with one of her daughters. Nancy announced her intentions and attacked. She grabbed Nancy by the hair and dragged her across the ground. Phoebe tried to pull Epsey away, but Epsey refused to release her hold. Phoebe then drew the pistol and fired. At nearly the same moment, Miles allegedly fired a double-barreled shotgun. Phoebe later claimed her brother did not know what he was doing. Nancy, enraged and injured, then picked up a stick and struck Epsey in the head until she lost consciousness. The family left her there. Phoebe's account admitted the shooting and beating, but described them as the chaotic end of a confrontation that Nancy had never intended to become fatal. The prosecution portrayed the scene as something far colder, At trial, prosecutors argued that Epsey and her children had been deliberately decoyed to Flat Rock. They rejected the claim that Nancy merely intended a fistfight. Why, they asked, had Phoebe brought a pistol? Why had Miles brought a shotgun? The presence of those weapons suggested preparation. According to the prosecution, Epsey was attacked without warning while her children watched 3 members of one family carry out the killing. Yet even the newspapers could not agree on who fired the fatal shot. One early report said Nancy shot Epsey while Phoebe restrained her. Another said Phoebe fired the revolver. Nancy claimed the pistol had belonged to Epsey, who dropped it during the struggle. Phoebe then picked it up and fired as Epsey prepared to attack Nancy with a knife. Those accounts cannot all be true. The contradictions may reflect inaccurate reporting, misunderstood testimony, or attempts by each accused person to reduce individual responsibility. What appears clear is that Epsey suffered injuries from more than one weapon. Afterward, Nancy, Phoebe, and Miles disappeared. Authorities made no immediate arrests. Deputy Sheriff Hales searched the area but could not find the suspects. Epsey's brother later informed Sheriff Langdon that the family had been located. Phoebe fled Kentucky and eventually reached Chattanooga, Tennessee. There, she attempted to begin a new life in December 1900. Before the killing, Phoebe had worked in the Somerset home of Police Chief R.D. Hughes. Hughes reportedly considered her a trustworthy servant. On the morning of December 19th, he was standing on Market Street speaking with Chattanooga officer J.D. Croft when a veiled young woman walked past them. Hughes thought he recognized her. The officers followed. When they moved closer, Hughes became convinced that the woman behind the veil was his former employee, and the fugitive wanted for the Flat Rock killing. When confronted, Phoebe began crying and reportedly became hysterical. She was taken to police headquarters, half fainting and terrified. There, she confessed her involvement. She also begged the officers not to leave her alone in a cell. The following day, Phoebe agreed to tell her story. But first, she wanted to know what Kentucky might do to her. Do they hang women in Kentucky? Officials reportedly told her that execution was unlikely. She then asked what happened to women who killed. They answered that a person convicted of deliberate murder could expect life imprisonment. Phoebe acknowledged that her actions appeared premeditated and said she did not expect to escape punishment. She described her mother's unhappy marriage and the plan to whip Epsey, but she refused to reveal where Nancy and Miles were hiding. Phoebe insisted that 5 witnesses could support her account, and although she admitted firing the pistol, she maintained that she did not consider herself a murderess. Chief Hughes ordered her a meal. Then authorities arranged to return her to Kentucky. Nancy, Hunley, and Miles remained at large for months. In May 1901, Kentucky Governor Beckham offered rewards of $150 each for their arrest. Authorities believed they were hiding in the Tennessee mountains. They were eventually located in Virginia and returned to Kentucky. By June 1901, Nancy and Phoebe were standing trial together in Pulaski Circuit Court. Miles had also been indicted for alleged conspiracy. The courtroom now had to decide more than who fired which weapon. The trial raised a deeper question. Could the killing be excused under a doctrine that existed not in Kentucky statutes, but in public sentiment? It was called the Unwritten Law. Around the turn of the 20th century, juries sometimes acquitted men who killed someone accused of violating the sanctity of their homes. The unwritten law was not a formal law. It was a social argument, a belief that some injuries to marriage were so severe that a husband or father could not be expected to rely on the courts. Nancy Hunley attempted to reverse that argument. If a husband could be excused, why should a wife not receive the same consideration for killing the woman she believed had taken her husband? Nancy and Phoebe's defense combined 2 claims. First, protection of the mother. Second, they contended that Epsey had invaded and damaged their home. The prosecution rejected both arguments. This was not a spontaneous defense. Epsey had been lured to an isolated location and killed in front of her children. The first jury could not reach a verdict. The jurors reportedly cast 159 ballots before finally admitting that further deliberation was useless. 10 jurors favored acquittal. Only 2 favored conviction. The results suggest that most of the jury accepted at least part of the defense's account. Nancy and Phoebe were released on bonds of $1,000 each while awaiting another trial. They would have to face a second jury. The second trial began during the October 1901 term of the Pulaski Circuit Court. Once again, the defense invoked protection of the home and the unwritten law. This time, the jury reached a decision. On November 5, 1901, Nancy Hunley and Phoebe King were convicted, not of murder, but of manslaughter. Each woman received a sentence of 5 years in the Kentucky penitentiary. The lesser conviction suggests the jury rejected the theory of fully premeditated murder. The jurors may have believed there had been provocation, a genuine struggle, or some element of self-defense. But they also refused to declare that the killing was lawful. Nancy and Phoebe were sent to prison. Their sentences soon attracted attention far beyond Kentucky. An Oregon newspaper used the case to challenge the unwritten law. Its editorial argued that if juries excused men for killing to protect their homes, they could not logically deny that same defense to women. The newspaper called it a wretched plea. On April 2, 1902, the Kentucky State Prison Commission ordered both women released on parole. They had been sentenced only 5 months earlier. The surviving notice did not explain why. Their rapid release may also have reflected the very social attitudes debated in the newspapers. The written sentence did not keep them behind bars for very long. The surviving newspaper record tells us surprisingly little about Epsey Sellers herself. She was described as a married woman and a mother. Her children watched her die. Yet most newspaper accounts defined Epsey through accusations. She was called a mistress, a rival, a seducer, and a destroyer of another woman's home. Those descriptions were part of the legal narrative. One report claimed that Nancy's husband had borrowed money and property from Epsey and never returned it. If that allegation was true, some behavior described as harassment may instead have involved Epsey attempting to recover what she was owed. The newspapers never meaningfully explored that possibility. They also gave little attention to Epsey's children, who lost their mother and then became part of a national court case. More than a century later, the two principal versions of the killing still do not converge. The prosecution said ambush. Phoebe said chaotic struggle. Nancy claimed Epsey was armed. The courts produced a legal outcome. They never produced a single, uncontested version of the truth. Epsey Sellers was nearly reduced to a footnote in the debate over the women who killed her. This presentation is based on surviving newspaper and court-related accounts. Contemporary reports conflict on important details. Representative historical visuals are labeled as illustrative. Do you have additional information or a connection to this story? Share it with us in the comments. Follow, like, and share to help us preserve more hometown stories. For bonus research, ask us about our subscriber group.